Welcome to the Legacy Leadership Podcast, where we help Christian founder led nonprofits get funded so that you can lead well, live whole, and leave a legacy. Today, I want to talk to you about how often you should ask people for donations. And this is a big thing that I talk about with many different leaders where they're wondering how often they should go back to the same people. And I find that many leaders don't even go back to people after the first time of asking and receiving, or they receive a gift and then they just wait for somebody to give again. It feels really awkward to go back to somebody again to ask them. And so they kind of just leave it to chance of whenever somebody feels like giving or they come to mind. Maybe they just send out newsletters or a blog or an email and just assume that when people see it and people are moved, then they're going to give. But I want to encourage you that it is okay to ask. When we go to the 4 basic steps framework, we have plan, present, gain, and maintain. That it is okay to present, it is okay to ask. Not only is it okay, but we should be presenting, we should be asking. And especially for those who are partnering with us to a greater degree, it is appropriate for us to ask those people to get involved in the things we're doing, because we're not investing or asking for donors. We're not creating donors. We're creating partners. That when we think about fundraising from a relational perspective, and we realize that effective and long-lasting fundraising really is all about relationships, then we need to think of our donors not just as donors but partners. And when I think of somebody as a partner, they are invested in the mission with me. They're invested in the thing that we're trying to accomplish. They're part of the team. And so if there's a need that arises, why wouldn't I want to give my team, give my partners the opportunity to respond to that need together? I know that I need to do something. I feel a responsibility that when I hear about a need, I'm moved, I have compassion, I know that I want to go and help people, and my partners are going to feel the exact same thing. I think about all the different disasters or things that happened in Haiti. I remember one that comes to mind is Hurricane Matthew. I think it was back in 2018 where a big hurricane came through. It devastated part of Haiti in the southern part, and there were these flash floods that were happening, tons of water, rivers overflowing, and people's homes were literally washed away in the floods. Some people's homes remained, but so much water went through their houses that they lost all their belongings. And I remember hearing about students at our school. We did an evaluation and we followed up with all these different students, and we had so many of them that had school books that were there where they were relying on those books to be able to learn. Their notebooks, their school books, their books for homework, they were all in their homes and just completely washed away. They had their uniforms for school. They had food, what little bit that they had collected or their parents had been able to get. Some of these families only eating once a day or not even once a day, that all their food is just washed away. The little bit of belongings that maybe they had, the piles of clothes, or if they were lucky, they might have had a mattress, and these floods and mudslides and everything else just going through their homes. You can get the picture of what I'm trying to share. And when I heard about these things, I was moved. I realized that we needed to do something. There was something that I needed to take as action. And how would it have been if I just kept that to myself and said, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for these people. I need to do something. I need to respond. And with my limited resources, I went and tried to do what I could to respond. Maybe I went and I helped do cleanup, or I helped to get books that were there and put them out in the sun and help to dry them. Maybe there was one family that I knew in particular that I was close with and I wanted to help buy new school books for their children. But I didn't just stop there because I had all these other partners, thousands of people that were sponsoring kids in my school, that were partnering with the construction of different schools, that had helped to build houses for people during the earthquake. I had thousands of other partners who were also just as invested in these kids' lives, in these communities that I was working in. And so, of course, I wanted to ask them. Of course, I wanted to give them the opportunity to partner in the response to this disaster that had swept through. So, those that were specifically invested in a particular child's life, I called them up. I sent emails. I let them know the status of what was happening with their sponsored child, what had happened to their home, their school books, because we were partnered together in helping this child to get an education, to get fed, to be taken care of. And it's the same thing with my larger partners that I was able to go to them and say, these are the issues that we faced at school. We need new school benches. We need new blackboards, whatever it was that was going on, that of course I would want to talk to my partners and involve them. And so I think you get the idea that when people are partners, that we want to treat them as such. We want to involve them. We want to let them know when a need arises. But then the next question becomes, how often do we ask? If we are meant to ask people and people want to be asked, then how often? How much is too much? I think the fear that can often arise is that if I'm asking too frequently, people are going to get annoyed, people aren't going to like me, maybe I'm bothering people or I'm off-putting. I'm putting this bad feeling in people's gut where they're just like, oh no, Taryn is coming to ask me again. Like every single time I come around, like Taryn's just asking me for things. And that's not what we want to create either. We want to create these really beautiful relationships where there's a balance between the relationship that's being developed and the work that we're accomplishing together. I don't want to treat people just like a money tree that I just keep running back to and trying to get them to give more and more. And so, how do you know how much is too much? For some people, they're going to tell you. Some people are going to come out and directly say, I can help out once a year. Some people are going to tell you by their behavior that they can only give so many times. And so, what I like to do with my larger partners, those who are giving larger amounts of money, is I like to track how often they've given. I have a list of all these different larger donors, and I have a threshold in my organizations where I said that anybody who's given more than $500 in a one-time gift, that they go on to my large partner list, my large donor list. And with these people, I track their gifts and I track when they give, I track how often they give, and I can pick up on patterns and I can see, oh, okay, John and Susie, they give once a year. Every year at the end of the year, my end of the year giving campaign, my end of the year banquet, that John and Susie make a donation in the month of December. And they've done that every year for the last 3 years. And they don't respond to any other requests or any other asks. And so when I'm looking at John and Susie, I'm only going to make an ask one time at the end of the year because by their behavior, that's what they've given me permission to do. I might put some feelers out there here and there. Maybe I do include them. Well, I do, not maybe. I do include them in all of my newsletters that go out. I include them in my blog updates. They're friends of mine on Facebook. If all of a sudden I see that they respond in the middle of the year and they give a really big gift in June and then they give again in December, then maybe the following year I reach out and make another request in June. If they have shown a pattern or they have given twice during the year, then by their giving behavior, they're giving me permission to ask a second time. Some people might give 4 times a year, and I can look at the pattern and say, by their behavior, they've given me permission to make a request 4 times a year, that I can go back to them and that I can ask them that many times. Sometimes we have to just feel the waters. Sometimes we have to test the waters a little bit and we have to see how people are going to respond. And so oftentimes I will ask somebody one time that's outside of their normal behavior. I might ask somebody who's an annual donor. I might wait until the middle of the year and then make a request. And I might send an email. And if you have a copy of my large donor email template, then you can look and you can see this. But I'll make a request and I'll let them know about a particular situation that is going on. Maybe it's the hurricane in Haiti. Hey, John and Susie, I don't know if you heard, but there was a huge hurricane that happened in Haiti. And I'm just emailing a small handful of donors and letting them know about what has happened. And we need to come up with $50,000 so that we can do XYZ. And I'm reaching out to you because you're one of our close partners. And I wanted to let you know of what is going on. And when I go and make the ask, I am clear that I'm asking. And so, John and Susie, I wanted to ask if you would be able to partner in this with us. And then I give an out. I give them a place where I take the pressure off. I don't want them to feel like they have to give or there's this expectation to give. And so I usually couch it in something along the lines of, I know that you've already given so much. If now is not a good time of year for you to give, I completely understand. I appreciate the partnership and all the support that you've already given to our organization. So that gives John and Susie an out, gives my partner the place to say, yeah, now's not really a good time, or follow up with us at the end of the year. I'm giving them that place to say, yeah, we're not at a good place financially, or we're not able to right now, or whatever. But I'm treating them again as a partner and saying, I want to let you know of what's happening. I want to give you the opportunity to respond. And I want to recognize that it might not be a good time for you right now. And if John and Susie respond and they say, yes, we're sending in a $10,000 check, it's on the way, that now tells me that that was an okay ask for me to make. It was appropriate for me to make that ask. And now John and Susie, again, by their behavior, have given me permission to ask them twice a year. And maybe I wait until December and I let that go. And then maybe I test the waters with every 3 months instead of every 4. We need to be really careful, though, that we're not tipping the scales to where our asking is outweighing our relationship. If I only talk to John and Susie when I have a request to make, then I'm starting to get to that place where I'm almost teaching John and Susie that the only time they ever hear from me is when I have a request. I become the person that walks around the corner and they say, oh no, Tyron's going to ask me for money again. And when they can give, they give, but when they can't, they feel uncomfortable, and it creates this very uncomfortable relationship dynamic. So, like I've talked about in the past, it's really important for us to have other relational touch points outside of the request. I need to make sure that when they do give, I send them a thank you card. I need to be following up on Facebook. They need to see my newsletters. I want to make sure they're getting a copy of my blog, that when there is something significant and there's something to celebrate, that I'm including them in that. And there's this fine balance that you'll find as you do this of communicating too much or communicating too little. And every single relationship has its own balance to it, has its own balance of what is needed. Some people want to be communicated with a lot and they appreciate that communication. Other people want to be communicated with very little. Some people like to be asked once a year and some people like to be asked every single quarter. Some people like to know what the monthly focus is and they want to know every single month, give me an update of what the biggest need is of the organization. I've had some people that they tend to respond to my monthly requests that come out in my newsletter, and other people respond only once a year. The big key is recognizing that when you're asking that question, how much is too much, how often is too often, that there's not a set rule that's there that applies to every single person. Every relationship has its own dynamics. Every relationship has its own ebbs and flows. And so it's important, what I've found, is to track these relationships. We can only maintain so many relationships in our head. There's only so many people that we can hold on to and say, I've got to call this person or call that person, or when is it time for me to send that person a note again? We can do that with a small handful of people. Our closest friends, our pastor, our wife, our kids. There's this small group of people that we can maintain the relationships with off the top of our head. And I would argue that even some of those, if we're not intentional, we can lose track of the things that are important for us to be doing in order to maintain that relationship. And so when we get into how often should you ask, I would encourage you to track it for every single relationship. Look at each one and say, when should I ask again? What's their giving pattern? When did they give last time? And when do I ask next time? If somebody gives annually and I put them on my annual follow up, then I want to follow up at the same time of year that they tend to give. Some people give every December or give towards the end of the year. Some people give in the middle of the year. Everybody has their own pattern, their own rhythm. And it is important to make sure that we're not asking too much. And I do want to touch on this before we hop off, because I think some of us have the tendency to not ask at all, and other people have the tendency to ask too much and not recognize it. And one of the ways and areas that I see this happen is when people are asking, they're not always equating every single ask to not money. How am I going to say that properly? There's a lot of different things that we ask for that are not just financial asks. And so I see this happen a lot of times in churches where we end up burning the relationship. We end up burning people out because we're asking so often. We're asking people of their time. We're asking them to donate materials. We're asking them to show up and work an event. We're asking them to show up early. We're asking them to teach Sunday school. We're asking them to give money in the offering. We're asking money for our large project that we have going on in our building fund. And people don't recognize that every single time we're asking, it's a withdrawal from the relationship. We need to make sure that we're investing just as much into the relationship as we're asking out of it. And that some people have a lot to give. Some people have a lot of capacity. Some people have a lot of desire. Some people, they want to be asked and they want to be given the opportunities to do lots of things. And so we don't want to under ask. But then some people, they hit capacity. And we keep asking, keep asking, keep asking, and then we end up turning people off. We end up burning people out. We end up burning out the relationship. And so I want to make sure that we recognize that when I say an ask, it's not just a financial ask, but there's lots of different things we can ask for, and we need to be careful to manage our asks appropriately. Some people I can only ask one time a year, and I have to be really careful. Am I asking for money? Am I asking for time? Am I asking for an introduction? Am I asking for them to invite somebody to my end of the year fundraiser? I might only have one ask. This relationship might only merit or might only be at the place where I can make one request during the year. And so I need to be really careful about how do I use that ask. I learned this early on in doing some of my fundraising work. I remember an event where we were doing, it was an open house kind of event. It was actually a Starbucks fundraiser. And we were inviting people to come out to a coffee time at Starbucks. And this particular Starbucks location, they had offered for us to get 20%, 15%, I don't remember what the percentage was, but some percent of the sales that night. That everyone that we invited out, that when they went and bought a cup of coffee, that they were going to donate a percentage to our organization. And so we invited all these different people out. We invited out our donors. We invited out friends and family. And we said, hey, come out to Starbucks on this night and support this event, this fundraiser that we're doing. And I remember at that event, and this is actually my dad sharing with me, I don't even remember if I was at the event or not, but I remember that event. The lesson that came out of it was that we had several donors show up to that event who were larger donors, larger partners, people that would write a $500 check or a $1,000 check. And they showed up and they bought a cup of coffee. $2.50, which we got 10, 15, 20% from. And if we had just asked them to make a donation, they would have written us a $500 check, a $1,000 check. They would have written us a larger check to go towards the work. But instead, they showed up and bought a cup of coffee because that's what we asked them to do. We used our one ask, our one request to ask them and come and buy a cup of coffee rather than asking them to just write a check and make a donation. And it was a really valuable and costly lesson that we learned, that when we only have a limited amount of asks, we need to use them strategically. Now, there's some people where it makes sense to say, come out and support our restaurant fundraiser, or come buy a cup of coffee, or come volunteer for a workday. But when we have certain relationships that are able to invest financially to a certain degree, and we might only have one ask or two requests that we can make a year, we want to be strategic with what those asks are. So I want to encourage you that as you go throughout your week, to think about who are these larger partners, who are the people that are invested to a larger degree. And to not just think of the people that are giving financially, but you could also think of the people that are giving of their time, that are giving of their resources in any capacity. And I want to encourage you to go back through these people. Maybe you just pick 10, 15, 20 of them and to look at their giving pattern. Go back in your QuickBooks file or your accounting, go back and look at your volunteer lists and who is at different events and really track and see how often have they given and recognize that that's the frequency that they've given you permission to ask them. And if they haven't given again within that frequency, then now's a great time to go and ask. Ask them to get involved, ask them to make a donation, ask them to support something that you have going on. And if they have given within that frequency, then make sure you're making other relational touch points so that you're continuing to build the relationship, to maintain the relationship in between, so that when you do get to that point where it's time to ask again, the last time they heard from you wasn't when you were making another request. So I hope that this has helped you out today. If you want to learn more about how to fundraise, how to gain momentum in your fundraising, I would encourage you to go check out my book, Fundraising Momentum. You can find it on Amazon. Just search Fundraising Momentum and my name, Tyron Long. I'll also try to put this in the show notes. I'm still learning how to use show notes and all those other things. So if you don't see it, just go search for it. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. And this helps you to know how to ask people and the right frequency to do it, and how to build these great relationships with those who are partnering and investing in your organization.